The Suzuki TU250X versus the Royal Enfield Classic 500. Hang out with me for a few minutes and let's talk about this. What's up everyone? It's Alex. So I was asked a little while ago by Eric to do a comparison on the Suzuki TU250X versus the Royal Enfield Classic 500. I'm mostly going to be doing this from the standpoint of like which one's better for beginners, but I'll just give you some basic differences anyway and kind of which one I think you should lean towards. And these are both really basic, kind of low horsepower type of motorcycles, so I'm not going to get super into specs. The TU250X puts out somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 horsepower. The Royal Enfield 500s, the Classic 500, Bullet 500, they put out around 26 or 27 horsepower, depending on who you ask. So these are both low horsepower machines. The horsepower is not really the idea behind these. They both do their job really well, but they're not made to be, you know, ultra powerful performance machines or anything like that. So really, the horsepower is kind of negligible in this one. Obviously, with the Suzuki TU250, you have a 250-ish cc motorcycle. With the Royal Enfield Classic 500 or Bullet 500, I'm kind of lumping them together on this one. You have a 500-ish cc motorcycle. Both single-cylinder engines, both 5-speed transmissions, both are chain drive. Both are fuel injected at this point, and when I'm talking about the Classic 500s and stuff and the Bullet 500s, I'm talking about the more modern iteration of them where they are fuel injected, by the way. So if you go far enough back, the Bullet will be carbureted. Just keep that in mind. I'm talking about the modern iteration, which are fuel injected. And both are designed to have the classic styling in the kind of modern vintage sort of category of standard type motorcycles. The Royal Enfield Bullet basically being the same motorcycle they've made for decades and decades, just with little small updates along the way. The TU250 being based off of a previous model, but a much more recent addition to Suzuki's family. But one of the biggest things I will note is, even though you're talking about a 250 to a 500, so you're talking about twice the engine size in the Royal Enfield, due to the differences in weight and the differences in the way the engines are configured, with the Suzuki TU250 being an overhead cam engine and the Classic 500 Bullet 500 being a classic single pushrod style engine, you actually don't notice that big of a power difference between them, despite the fact that the horsepower on paper is considerably different. With the difference in weight and the difference in the way they're set up, when I ride these two motorcycles, I actually don't feel like the Classic 500 or a Bullet 500 is that much faster or that much more powerful than the TU250 is, ironically. And especially if we're talking about from the standpoint of a beginner, I think for all intents and purposes, just hands down, for a beginner anyway, the TU250 is going to be the clear choice. At least in the United States, it's probably going to be easier to find one. It's light, it's carefree, it's very simple. And while the Classic 500 or a Bullet 500 from Royal Enfield can be a very good beginner motorcycle, I also find that, for lack of a better explanation, they tend to be persnickety a little bit, especially when they're new. They need quite a bit of breaking in before they act right, especially on startup. I have found that a lot of the fuel-injected Royal Enfield 500 singles, on initial startup when they're cold, they will be a little bit difficult to start. They will give you a little bit of problems till they're nice and warmed up. And they do tend to be much more clunky and much more finicky until they're well broken in. And it's definitely one of those kind of motorcycles where if you don't ride it pretty regularly, you will have to tinker with it some, I have found in my experience anyway. It's not to say that they're not good motorcycles, it's not to say they're not good for beginners at all, but it will be a little bit more finicky, whereas the TU250X, in all of my experience with them, is a very hands-off, very easy, starts easy every time, rides easy, runs easy. There's almost nothing to it at all. The Royal Enfield is much more of a hands-on. You have to learn the motorcycle, learn what it likes, learn what it doesn't like, and it will take you a little bit more practice and more riding, etc., to get to where you can use it efficiently. It's just a little bit more difficult motorcycle to get used to, whereas the TU250 is the classic definition of a universal motorcycle. It's very easy. Classic 500, Bullet 500 are easy motorcycles, but especially before they're broken in, they do tend to be a little bit finicky from my personal experience. They are going to be a little bit more prone to part failures, so they will require probably more work and a little bit more maintenance over time than the TU250 will. Just being completely honest here, I have seen things like fuel pumps, etc. fail on the Classic 500s and the Bullet 500s, whereas I have never seen anything like that fail on a TU250. So, all in all, just like anything else, it's going to come down to preference. You need to sit on both motorcycles if you can find the Royal Enfield in your area. Some areas that's getting kind of hard to find a 500 anymore because they discontinued them for the US. If you can find them, you need to sit on both motorcycles. If you get a great deal on the Royal Enfield 500, they've been making it forever. You can get parts. If something breaks, you can replace it. So I'm not necessarily trying to shy you away from the 500 series and the Royal Enfields, but I will say the quality and the overall feel of the 500 singles in the Royal Enfields is not anywhere near what the 650s is. So when it comes to TU250 versus a Classic 500 or a Bullet 500 in the Royal Enfields, especially for a beginner or anyone that just doesn't want to mess with their motorcycle a lot, I would definitely nudge you more towards a TU250. Just personal opinion as always, and just from my experience with dealing with both motorcycles as far as it goes with reliability and not having to mess with it. I like the Royal Enfield 500 singles, but you do have to mess with them more than you would a TU250, if that makes any sense to you guys. As always, guys, let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'd like to apologize real quick for the lack of content over the last week or so. I have been sick. Don't worry, not COVID thing, just a regular flu bug, but I have been sick, and I don't want to be shooting videos for you guys all sick, so that was that. We're back to it now. We'll get back on a regular schedule. Thank you guys for sticking around. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day, guys. I'm Alex. Peace.